Was it like a fire inside of you that decided that this is the thing that is important to me? I'm going to write it. How did you find that intrinsic motivation?
Well, it certainly started as a fire where I was starting a blog in 2004 in Nebraska, and everybody in my life is like, "Why are you doing that? Is somebody paying you?" No. Well, why would you do that? They didn't they didn't get it. I couldn't give them a straight answer either. I just was compelled to create. But, it took another 6 years or so before I wrote some blog posts that were popular, and a couple publishers reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you like to write a book about this?" And I'm glad that they did. Practically, I could have just kept going and kept writing about that stuff and built a bigger audience that way and self-published a book and sold it that way. But the honest truth is I wouldn't have had the self-confidence to do that at that point in time in my life. And so it was their vote of confidence to have the vision of me as not just some guy playing around on his blog, but actually an author that they wanted to put some money behind and release a book and see how it does, and to assign me an editor who is really more of a project manager, and to have that contract there, and have to tell your friends and family that you got a book deal, and besides just returning the money, how humiliating would it be to also to tell them all that it fell through and you didn't do it. And so that was like a really tough project to get through. I had set up everything for something like that. I wasn't quite sure what it was. I left Silicon Valley in 2008. I had job offers to work as a designer for various companies, recruiters contacting me and stuff. But I just left and I went to Chicago, and I didn't have a plan other than, well, I'm just going to get myself a relatively cheap apartment and experiment. And so it was a couple years of experimentation before that book deal came. And I did kind of have things in place. I wasn't sure what I was making the space for, but I was making the space for something. Around that time, if there was something that did give me the confidence, did give me the faith that I would find something through my explorations, it was the Steve Jobs Stanford commencement address, which hopefully a lot of your listeners have already seen, where he's basically saying you just follow your curiosity because it already knows what you want to become, and you can't connect the dots moving forward. You can only connect them in reverse. Just like we were talking about this process of innovation. You don't always know what you're going to find, but you might have an inkling that there's something. And for me, that inkling was maybe just not feeling like it was a fit for me to be working in a job. And so I did get that wonderful opportunity to write that first book, and it was a disappear for 6 months, lock yourself in your apartment, pretty unhealthy, really, way to go about things in the short, or in the long term, very unhealthy. In the short term, it was, I was relatively young. I was 31, and I didn't have a lot of obligations. So I made the space for it and just told myself, get through this and your life will hopefully be different. And that was correct. I probably could have written a better book if I had more space and time, and maybe was a little happier even at that period of time. But I did it, and that changed everything. And so now when I write a book, I take a lot more time, and I give it a lot more revisions and try to just keep making the best book that I can. There's always this, what I call the finisher's paradox, which is that by the time you get to the end of any project that is a project of characteristics and scale that you haven't yet completed before, by the time you get to the end of that project, you will have learned. And so, whatever you've come up with, you can already see what's wrong with it. And aside from, you can't just start over because you'll never be done and the process will repeat itself. So you can't ship anything without some part of you saying that this sucks. Like, you're doing the best I love the Maya Angelou quote, "Do the best you can until you know better, then when you know better, do better." Which is a slight contradiction because you know better when you're putting it out there, but it is as good as you can do right now. And so it's just the way that I've approached it is trying to just get a little bit better every day. I know that when I first got that book deal, I had a friend who I knew one author, and I talked to him, and he was like, "Do not do this. This is going to be the most work you've ever done in your life for so little money. And if you don't already have some kind of business that the book is going to help you grow, it's a complete waste of time." And I listened to that, but I said, I kind of don't care. This is going to be my first book. And maybe 10 years from now, I'll be, you know, I'll write a good book or a better book, or I'll just keep doing it. And maybe 10 years from now, I'll have the hang of this. Now it's 13 years since then, and I'm getting the hang of it. I'm a lot better than I was then. I can still be a lot better. And, hopefully a little more success comes along with that. But for now, I'm making enough to get by in Colombia, and I'm getting paid enough to keep making things. And so that's where I find the motivation, I think, is just the joy of doing what I do. The motivation has to change over time, I think. I've heard other authors say that. I think it was Simon Sinek was saying that when he was talking with Seth Godin on some Facebook Live. They're like, I've just noticed that every book I write, like I've got to find a different source of motivation. I think that's true.